All right, so I think we got time for one more. What do you guys say? One more question? Yeah, motivation, good one. And honestly, this is probably one of the most common questions I get about motivation and how to study when you're unmotivated. Based on psychology and actual study systems and tips, based on research, what is the way to go about actually doing work when you don't want to? What is the lasting fix? Well, motivation. Let's define motivation. Motivation to me, the way I define it, is a lack of something, the wanting of something, right? Because you can't want something if you have it. Wanting something is the definition of motivation, right? When you're motivated to do something, it's because you want whatever the result is that you're not getting. And so if you want to be motivated to do work when you really don't want to, and you're really unmotivated and you still want to be able to do that work later down the line, right? Because it's two different wants. What do? How do you approach this from a psychological perspective where it actually works? There are a couple things. One, when you define motivation as the lack of something, it then becomes much easier to figure out how to get it. So let's figure out what the different types of motivation are. First of all, there's intrinsic motivation and there's also extrinsic motivation. Okay, what's the difference? Intrinsic is things that, they're within. It comes from within, from you to the world. Extrinsic is based on external rewards, anything that influences you to go chase something else. If by definition you're unmotivated to do work, it means that you don't want to do work. So the question in itself doesn't make sense. So let's redefine this as, how can I do the work when I don't want to do the work, but I still want the result that the work will give me, right? Because we all want good grades, we all want to do well, we all want to get into grad school, get good jobs, all of that. That's the reward that you get, but you don't want to do the work to get it. And honestly, if you did and everybody did, then I wouldn't be here, school would be easy, everybody would be in school, everybody would have passed, everybody would get A's. So the question is, how can you make this easier on yourself? There are two types of motivation, but within this, there are actually a lot of subgroups, so let's go over them. It kind of goes like this, right? There's also, we kind of forgot something, but this would be amotivation, which is the absence of motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from inherent satisfaction and, say, love of the game. This is the stuff that you would do when you have free time because you don't need anything externally regulating you. You're like, I don't want to do work because I want to do this other stuff, right? That is the intrinsically motivated stuff. But here, extrinsic, let's go over the different types of extrinsic motivation, of which there are 4. First, we have external regulation. Then you also have introjected motivation. Then you have identification motivation. And last, you have integrated motivation. And actually, to make this more realistic, if this was a continuum of increasing motivation, the intrinsic would be over here, intrinsic. So what do these mean? Well, external regulation has to do with consequences. So to chase/avoid consequences. Okay, introjected. Introjected has to do with your ego, which in other words is basically how you want to be perceived by others. So this is pretty powerful. Think of anything you post on Instagram, anything that you show people, anything you brag about. This is introjected motivation. You want to fit in. Your ego wants a boost, and self-esteem increases status. Ego boosts status. That's the point, to help you fit in, to help you gain more out of society. Okay, identification motivation. This is where you value the outcome. You have put the outcome out there. Like if I wanted to be the best at something, let's say I wanted to be the best pianist, right? I'm valuing the best as a goal to work towards. I'm valuing, winning a competition because it's on the way to become the best. So this is, you value the outcome, but it doesn't necessarily yield a result that boosts a basic psychological need, which would be competence, relatedness, or autonomy. So think of identification as more of like I like the result that this is giving me. In other words, like I should do this. This one would be like integrated, I do this. I am someone who does this. It's integrated with your personality. And then intrinsic is just, I love to do it. And the act of doing it brings me joy. These are the different types of motivation. So let's go through them. How can you leverage these to help you get more work done? Understand that motivation doesn't come first most of the time. When you think about work, and then you have result. Motivation It doesn't come here. It comes here and stays here. Or actually, it would be more like this. That's motivation. It comes after the work, because motivation comes from seeing a result for the amount of effort that you put in that's perceived to be worthwhile. So in other words, if I put in an X amount of work, I need at least Y amount of results to make it seem worthwhile. If that happens, if it's above that, then I will want to continue doing it. I want. Want is motivation. I want to keep seeing results. I want to keep seeing progress. That's motivation. And so to do work you don't want to do, you don't need to want to do it in the first place. And the best thing is that when you do work over and over again, you get better. And when you get better, the perceived effort goes down and the perceived results goes up. The behavior expectance, it increases. All of a sudden you want to do work. Why? We tend to like things that we're good at, but we can also learn to like things by getting good at them. And so you can actually train yourself to like doing work by getting good at it, by doing it and just starting. So how do you start? Well, you got to lower the activation energy, right? Every type of work has an activation energy. What do you do to that? Break it down. I've gone through this in other videos on my YouTube channel if you want to go back and watch it after we're done here. But in other words, all you have to do is, if you have an X amount of work, right, just break it up into little chunks, assign each of these arbitrary deadlines. That increases the perceived importance so that you have more important things as it approaches the deadline. Boom, all of a sudden you've overcome procrastination. So procrastination, that overcomes the activation energy to work. When you start working, it increases the motivation to continue. You get better, you get faster, you're even more motivated, you get the result. And you go from extrinsic, oh, I have to do this, right? So hard. I don't want to get punished. I don't want to fail out of school. Okay, by the way, this is probably one of the most motivating ones, right? Because at the extremes, right, I love to do it. That's pretty motivating. You want to do it. But this is also pretty motivating. I don't want to fail college. I don't want to fail university, right? That is incredibly motivating, but you only get it. I mean, how close are you willing to get there, right? Like it's a give and take, right? You don't want to get too close to the edge. You get too close to the edge, you might fall off, okay? So you don't want to get too close here, but it is the most powerful. The person that will work the hardest is always the person that has nothing to lose, right? Or they are at their breaking point, because it's like, well, I have nothing to lose. There's no downside. It can't get worse than where I am. And there's only everything on top that I want, right? We talked about how much you want. Want is motivation. If my base level is here, most people are here, my base level is here, right? And look how much stuff, like they want this stuff. I want all of this stuff, right? Way more stuff, okay? So you get close to the edge, right? And then as you get closer, right, you start liking it more. It's like, okay, I have to do this. I should do this. I guess like I like the result of what it gets. I'm someone who does it. I love doing it. You start shifting. You can also tie things in that you are more motivated for intrinsically, right? Like for example, with UofTearless, with the brand, right? I don't like studying. A lot of people think I like studying. I don't like studying. I just started to be okay with studying because I got good at it. Why did I get good at it? Well, because I wanted to fix my focus because I couldn't do anything because I have ADHD. It's hard to talk to people. It's hard to look them in the eye. If I don't have control over my ADHD, I wouldn't be here. Somebody who has ADHD is very motivated to be able to focus. Once I was able to focus, it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. I think more people should know about this. So what did I do? Okay, I started learning more and more and more. I started teaching some people, okay? Then I was like, well, I really like making videos. I've loved making videos ever since I was little, right? My first video I ever made, I was 12 years old. And no, I think it was 9. I was 9 years old. It was me enacting a movie scene with my brother. We showed it to our aunt on this little digital camera, right? So it's a very funny story, but it was terrible, by the way. It's like worst video of all time. It's like 2 pixels also. But yeah, so that was something that I really liked doing. So I tied it in with UofTearless, the brand, with teaching people. And over time, I started to like that better. But then what happens? I'm teaching people. I need to know. I need to have social proof. I need to get good grades so that people trust me enough to talk to you here. That took a while to do, but I figured it out. I went from studying 8 hours a day to 2 hours a day. I went from barely being able to focus in the library to pretty much never stressing for exams. It's possible, but you have to be at the edge at the beginning, or you can just steal from somebody else's life. Not their stuff, but their knowledge. That's what learning is, right? They teach you the other behavior to do when you're presented with a different stimulus. Where you have one stimulus, you have your behavior. The same stimulus, in somebody who knows something else will yield a different behavior. You want to learn what that is. Oh, he does this when this happens and he gets better grades. Okay, if I do that, I'll probably get better grades. You try it. Maybe it's not a causality, but you're definitely getting in the right direction. You do it over and over again. You act more and more like them. Act like the person you want to become, and eventually you won't have to pretend. Let me say that again. Act like the person who you want to become, and eventually you won't have to pretend. So when you see what you want the result, there's gonna be hiccups. It's never gonna be linear. Let's go over here. I'm gonna draw a little graph here, right? Let's say that you expect the results to come like this. I'll tell you right now, they're not, right? It's probably gonna look more like this. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, maybe you end up like here. It's an average. What you expect is an average, but when you're here, right, your time frame is so short, you expect to be here and you're here. But if you just waited a teeny bit longer, right, you would be here. You need to understand that it's not going to be linear. And when you get to here, when you encounter a hill, right, you're going to be like, oh, this is so much worse than I was doing before. It's like I'm backtracking, right? Don't fret. Lock in. You want to know how to lock in? I just gave a lecture on that. Okay, so now you can increase, right? When you see a hill, here's a rule for you. When you see a hill, what do? Can you do what you were doing here? No. Why? Because it's way harder. You need to put in more effort to get the same result when you see a hill. In other words, when you see a hill, sprint. Because then you will cover the hill in the same amount of time. But you can't expect to get the same speed of results if you don't put in more work when it gets hard to figure it out. So if you remember nothing else from today, just remember this and act on it. Motivation doesn't come before you start. Motivation comes from starting. Thank you.